Hello, hello. I'm Charley Miller with Unitonomy. I'm joined by Martin Lowe, who you recognize of OnPlane Consulting. And today we have a special guest, Patrick Goodman from Redeapp. And thank you, Patrick, for joining us from your backyard here. We
For sure.
it's April 24th. We're a few months into this social distancing thing, it feels like, with the pandemic. We started this show right at the beginning of this thing to talk about employee connectedness, which takes on a lot of different forms when we talk about leadership and managing people and how to make sure people are taken care of during this environment. Patrick, yeah, thanks for joining us. And I went down the rabbit hole yesterday reading blog posts that Redeapp puts out related to all things leadership and helping people get through things and how to work remotely. I want to just kind of tee it up to you first off to just say, how are things going for your firm right now through all of this?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me on. Happy to chat about what we're working on as a company and what we're building. But to your question, I mean, I think we're doing pretty well. Probably 25% of our workforce was already remote across the U.S. And so for at least that, part of our employee set, they were like, okay, it's just like another normal day. For the other 75% of us, me being one of those, being a work from home, or as one of my colleagues once said, we're not really in work from home mode. We're at home trying to stay safe and trying to be homeschool teachers and all this in the midst of a crisis. So, I mean, we're healthy, thankfully. We are, doing well as a firm. I will say though, as a engineer who loves whiteboards and markers and collaborating kind of face to face, working and designing and creating things, it's a pretty decent challenge for me just to kind of be, stuck in the house, and I'm on a call and I'm sitting outside because it's probably, if I'm honest, the most quiet place, even though I've got birds and things going on around me. But it is definitely it's a different normal. I'm not even sure what normal was, because we're now what 5 6 weeks. I've lost track at this point how far we're going, but all in all, I mean we're doing well. So
Good.
thanks for having me on.
Well, good to check in on it. Now tell everyone exactly what Redeapp provides. What are you all doing with your business?
Yeah, so Ready was an idea really born 2012. Is of course being based in the Midwest. There is a huge employee segment that is often really misunderstood from a perspective of what types of work productivities, tools, and communications that they would need in order to be productive, efficient, and get their work done. And so, we learned early on with, thousands of hours of conversations with customers, frontline workers that, hey, there's a workforce that we kind of term the non-desk workforce. These are the men and women who are in coffee shops, they're baristas, there are home health, assisted living workers, there are manufacturing, industrial, construction workers, there are hospitality type workers in the gaming industry, casino workers, hotel workers. And one thing that we learned early on is that for probably 90% of this workforce, they're really not being given many of the, if you will, digital productivity tools that many desktop workers have, like company email and SharePoint, and now Microsoft Teams and Slack. And if you're in development, you've got Atlassian and Jira and Confluence and a host of other things that you use in order to get your work done. But if you're a different worker who is working in front of customers, working with customers, building washers and dryers, you're building Tesla cars or batteries, or you're dealing, hands of poker or blackjack, you're not really working on those tools. And so we really had to learn what would be really important to have in a communication productivity tool set to help this worker really be efficient at their job. And kind of, as we said, ready up, how do we help this unique type of workforce get ready for work? So really, 8 years now, really building out and learning more about this worker has been, at least from, being a guy who loves to architect and build things, has been a whole lot of fun for me. Getting down and really asking some fun, interesting questions and really challenging many of the assumptions that even I had as a desktop worker of what's important in my day-to-day work life.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Martin, do you have a question?
Yeah. So I think, Patrick, we've talked quite a bit about Redeapp and how important it is. When I first met you, I think it was probably every bit of maybe 2, maybe even 3 years ago when
Hmm.
we first started talking. I think what's interesting to me is that everything that you said was important 2 years ago. It's important now. I think because of all the stuff that we've been going through over the last 6 weeks, it feels like it's even more important now because you start to see the gaps in communication that happen when everything gets stressful. So my question is what kind of gaps have you seen companies kind of, let's say, wake up to over the last 6 weeks, and maybe then how have have you guys seen them work to solve that problem?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'll try and be as succinct and brief as I can. But you know, really, a lot of companies, because we're still fairly early in helping identify what this worker needs and wants to get their job done, and then the next layer up of like leadership and management. For many people, are like, well, okay, that's a really nice to have. Some could say it's really a need to have from an operational efficiency and productivity standpoint. Well, those conversations about nice to have are really kind of gone, because our existing customer sets are like, it's heartwarming, but it's at the same time heartbreaking to know what's happening to these companies as employees are, being laid off, they're being furloughed. There's a lot of uncertainty for them. But we have lots of customers, the admins who kind of run the Redeapp product for their employees, or the employees who themselves who, call into our support team. In other words, are like, thank heavens, that we have a tool like this, because now communication really is becoming so much um, the driving force and like the heartbeat of a company. It's not just simply I'm communicating out like company news or information. I'm communicating how can I help my employees be safe at work, or how can I communicate and how can I empower leaders to communicate related to should I even come back to work, and if I do, then how do I do this safely, not only for myself but for my other coworkers. So on normal days, our support level, because we handle all the people forget passwords, get a new phone, we help these employee sets get back in, but our volume's like 8 and 10x of what it was just 6 weeks ago, because it is so crucial now, and just the number of inbound leads coming in from companies saying, okay, we get it, we really really need this yesterday, how can you help us that. So in that regard, those are some of the really tipping points that we have seen companies realize. It really is important, because honestly, doing bulletin boards and direct mail and payroll stuffers is just not going to cut it in the time of a crisis. It just won't, and it's too important, and the health and safety of our employees and their well-being is critical right now.
I love that because I think everyone has this old school idea, unfortunately, that leadership is someone who stands up on a pedestal and projects out, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And communication is this one
Right.
way waterfall down. And that's just not true. I think the best leadership you see is someone that really knows how to use his or her ears, right? You have to be a great listener, absorb information, and then act on it. And it's not just getting the information back from employees, right? It's also being developing empathy and really creating a culture where people know that the higher ups are always open to hearing and want to know. And if Redeapp is helping facilitate that back and forth, what is true communication, the two-way street, that's fantastic to know, especially since your business model is really shaped around the employees that often aren't heard because they're out in the field doing stuff. They don't have the mechanisms
Right.
to engage. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there really is this misunderstanding, I think, at times, because through no fault of their own, right? So a lot of leadership teams, they have a lot of tools and looking at dashboards on a 20-inch monitor, right? And what's the KPIs performance for my business? But what they often miss is that if I'm a frontline manager or leader and I'm managing a team of 50, 100, maybe sometimes 500 people at a manufacturing facility, or I'm managing an assisted living campus that has 120 people, how do I communicate to them right now? Right? There's no dashboard for me. Because right now, because COVID has changed everything so much, it's not just daily, it's like hourly. And so if I don't have a way, a tool that's in my pocket, pull out my phone and send communication, this is what's going on. Here's what you need to know about. And what that really does allows managers to communicate, but also allows the employees to respond in a very structured way so that their voice is heard. They're informed about what's going on, because really the way that for many people right now, one of the challenges related to this, because there's so many unknowns. There are things that we know and there are things that we don't know. But in times like this, if employers have a means by which they can effectively and consistently and clearly communicate to their workforce, let them be heard, let them know what's going on, because that continual information is what's going to help alleviate some of those fears. And I think ultimately, whatever point in the future, really kind of move the country back on a path to helping, reopening up its workforce in a very safe way. Those type of things right now, and having the ability to do that is really, really critical for companies who are looking to engage with empathy with employees and understanding, because we're all in this together, right? COVID doesn't care if you got a desk or a non-desk, or you're sitting outside on your patio. The virus doesn't care, but companies can really show lots of empathy in how they communicate, often with their employees.
I have a question for both of you, and Martin, maybe you want to take the first stab at this, but what are some tips that you would give to a leader of an organization to not just ask the right questions, but also how do you showcase vulnerability? That's something that I hear a lot about right now. Like, leaders need to show vulnerability because they don't have all the answers. Things are changing day by day, as Patrick mentions. Oh, was I just muted?
Yep, we lost it for a second. As long as you're recording.
It was an amazing question, so let me ask it again. Sorry. All right, so thinking about some tips to give to leadership inside companies, that yes, what are the questions they should be asking, but also what is a real authentic way of projecting vulnerability? We hear a lot of people talking about leadership needs to show vulnerability right now because, as Patrick mentions, look, things are changing day by day. Like, we don't really know what's around the corner right now because things are evolving so fast with COVID-19 as it affects work. How do you project vulnerability in an authentic way? Martin, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things. One, as I think about communication generally, from being somebody that did surveys at large companies like Amazon, like across their network of buildings, or at a Cummins or other large manufacturers, communication was always the worst score. Like, always, on every one of those surveys and every one of those companies, if everything was at 90%, communication would be at 70%. If everything was at 70%, communication would be like 20%. And I think it comes with a few just basic things that people can do now. The first one is establish a cadence and a rhythm so that people know what to expect, right? Like, I think that is the first thing. The second thing is the shorter and more succinct you are, the better chance you have of people actually understanding your message. So, there's a lot of people right now who are trying to say, I'm in it with you, I'm having a hard time too, and they're getting publicly flogged because David Geffen says this from his yacht, right? And everybody's looking at that and going, well, you're not in this with me at all. And I don't think that was his intent. I don't think he posted that and went like, ha ha ha, I'm going to show everybody what I'm doing. I think he didn't post a message in a way that was clear to what people want. So, to start with, short, succinct, I know when I'm going to get the communication, I know what to expect. Anything you can do to make it easy for people to understand and give them some certainty around when they're going to get it. Certainty is hard to find, and mind share is hard to find right now. So, short, succinct, very clear, and then get on some sort of rhythm and cadence. And then I don't know, I'm sure Redeapp does quite a bit on this too. So I'd love to hear what Patrick thinks.
Yeah, it's really helpful, and to kind of take and build on what you just kind of said there, Martin. The daily, what we have seen so far, because part of our business, we have a success team, and so once companies come on board, we kind of help them, get up and running. But we've had lots of interactions with customers, and so some of the best ones right now, I can think of several in our manufacturing vertical where They're doing, to your point, Martin, daily. They do daily videos. They take the leader, and here's the important part about your yacht. This plant manager is not on a yacht. She's standing in on the plant floor and doing a 3-minute video about here's what's changing. Here's how we implemented this new, check-in process to help make sure that we're taking temperatures for all the employees who come in or all visitors who come in. They're sending out daily, like here are the number of known and active coronavirus cases, specifically. We've seen others who are, going to assisted living campuses, taking videos. I mean, literally pulling out, hey, here's my iPhone. Let me record a video because I'm right now at, this campus, ABC, and I'm, talking to these employees. And here are the top 3 concerns right now, and I've been here for 20 minutes. And here are the 3 concerns that people have. How are we going to, be safe for the next week or the next month? How are we going to know that we're going to get paid? It's one of the biggest questions that employees have right now about, what's my long-term, financial stability. And so having, leadership share this in a very meaningful way, no offense to CEOs with a big desk, but really, in this time, get out from behind your desk, go stand where your employees are and how they really are, feeling this impact to them. So, those are some things we've seen a lot. And then, of course, you've got the leadership message, but then what really, a company may hear from a leadership say once a day, but it's the next layer down that the manager layer, we call that layer the critical middle. This layer of leadership for a company is critical right now because, as the old saying goes, that an employee doesn't leave a company, they leave their manager. So how empathetic, how caring, how understanding to, your comment earlier, Charlie, how two ears, if you will, does this manager manage from, or is it, 3 mouths in one ear? How is he doing that well and effectively right now as employees have questions? Hey, this came up, I can't come in, and then being able to know that I sent the message and the manager read the message, but also then having a 2-way communication channel, because that really is going to help broker long-term confidence and commitment to that employee, to that organization for the mission that they're trying to achieve.
I love that critical middle. That's a really nice way of saying it because it really is a critical area where managers can thrive. And of course, there's going to be a lot of people in that critical middle that really probably feel unprepared right now for how to do this. So great for sharing that. Maybe a good place to end it today is just each of you, if you could offer up sort of one parting thought of advice for anyone in a field where they're not like me, where I get to work behind a computer all day in my basement, and I'm fairly protected from everything that's happening, being able to work remotely. But people that are in the field right now, going about their business because they have to, if one of those people could give their manager one piece of advice, what would it be right now for what's happening? Martin, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with assume positive intent. And the reason why I think positive intent is so important right now is that we're used to having a structured set of rules where we can say, this is the rule, and here's how I'm going to follow the rule. And what's happening right now with government regulation inside of companies themselves is, to Patrick's point, this is moving. In some cases, it's moving almost hourly in terms of what someone should do or how they need to respond, whether that's how they're dealing with a home situation, whether that's how we're dealing with regulations coming from the government, whether that's how a customer or how a business is taking care of the customer. It's all moving really quickly. And you have to kind of sometimes make these snap decisions where there's no black and white rule or there's no past practice to go back to and say, well, how did we solve this last year when it came up? And where I see people really get jammed up is they assume either positive intent, like, hey, this is a weird time, I'm going to assume that this person's not trying to get one over on me, I'm going to do the right thing by them and know that it'll sort itself out. Or they say, oh, I bet this employee's just staying home because they don't want to work, right? Well, you don't actually know that. And then the places where I've fielded like real problem questions have been, they've started from I want to set this up in a way that whether it's customers, business partners, employees can't screw me by doing something nefarious inside of this framework, instead of saying, hey, I think everybody actually wants to be here. I think everybody's trying to do their best. I also know that everybody's in a weird situation. I can't make a rule for all of it. I'm going to assume that this person's going to try and do their best, and I'm going to treat them that way because 95% of the time I'm going to be right, and I'm not going to treat 95% of my people like a problem 1% or 5% or whatever, because they're going to remember this for like a long, long time. So to start your decisions with assuming positive intent, that people are going to try and do their best, and use that as your framework.
Yeah, man, I love that. It's helpful, and it really kind of what I'm going to say is somewhat of an echo of that. What I would really say to a manager leader who's managing a workforce right now is that for a long time we've heard this conversation about a work-life balance. I think really right now it has to be flipped. It has to be life-work balance. Be a whole human right now, knowing that, to Martin's point, our kids, our families, our relationships will remember this forever. So if it's 2 in the afternoon and my kid's like, hey, I want to go outside and throw football, and I close the computer and I'm not on Slack and my little green dot's not on, okay, and I expect and I welcome that from the rest of our team. Right now I've got a middle school daughter who loves baking, right? So we've done all kinds of chocolate cakes and donuts and we're watching Netflix shows once a day because she's going to be able to remember these really unique times that it wasn't just daddy was home and was always on a Zoom call, even though daddy looks, the new term I learned this morning called Zoom exhausted. It might be a term, I understand that. And so the same as an employee, but also someone who leads people, just recognize we're in a life-work balance, not the other way around right now.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Patrick Goodman, as we all pursue our life-work balance. This was really great to get some thoughts from you today, and everyone check out Redeapp.com. It's a really awesome product. Martin, thank you as well.
Cheers.
Yeah, and this was great,
Cheers, all.
guys.
Be well.
All right. Everyone, thank you. We'll be back next week.